Talking CRM with Jeff and David, getting the best value for the whole organization from your integrated CRM and accounting systems. David Beard, CRM Principal, and Jeff Richards, Head of Training Program Development for Sage CRM, spend time chatting with customers, resellers, and others about Sage CRM in action around the globe. In this episode, Jeff continues the conversation of Sage CRM as a hybrid cloud offer, and we all talk further about managing the evolution of a customer's need once they're on board.
I think that's very interesting that you said that it's on a server that you can control. Sage CRM is not a cloud native product, but thinking about the implementations that you've worked with and the trends, how big is the idea that there must be some sort of virtualization? Do you literally mean a server that they control is a box in the corner of the room, or are we talking about a hybrid cloud solution where people will be mixing it up with an Azure platform or an Amazon Web Services platform?
A box they control doesn't necessarily mean in their server room or in their mop closet. It's an Azure server or hosted by a provider. I would say half of our clients, the server isn't in their building. It's hosted somewhere. But still, having that concept of single tenancy and the ability to, that's your database and that's your server. I think that's why Sage CRM is so much more malleable than the other mainstream systems.
Do you provide those services yourself, or do you contract those out to another manager, or do you leave that choice up to the customer themselves?
Not in the business of hosting people's systems. We're in the business of helping people with Sage CRM itself. I don't want to be in a business that I don't really understand, and because I don't have a technology background or the desire to have managed servers, I don't do that. I recommend a company if they need a recommendation. Like our system is hosted 2,000 miles away. It's very fast, and a lot of our clients use that system, but a lot of them too are on Azure or some other. I don't always know where the server is when we take over an account, but I would say half of them these days. And as companies need to, re-up on their systems, it really seems to be more and more of a sucker bet to get that server and get that implemented versus having it on a co-location facility or private cloud. The economics of it are overwhelming.
I want to think about costs, because you did bring up the idea that you're not part of the mix in terms of providing the platform on which Sage CRM runs. And you also said something interesting earlier on, which was that you described CRM as a service-intensive product. When you think about the customer's perspective, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing?
I'm going to take those two separately. Yes, there's a cost to host your system elsewhere. It's often a tenth of the cost or 20% of the cost of having that server in your building. So, where do you want it? If you go with Sage CRM and have it hosted somewhere, whether that's, in your building or elsewhere, it's still a fraction of the cost or significantly less money than Salesforce or Microsoft. And my comment about it being resource intensive, it's not really resource intensive so much as companies often, if you're successful, they just fall in love with it and they want to do more and more with it. And often what they want to do would require some guidance.
And possibly gets more complicated as they get more out of it. They go, can we bend it to do this instead?
In which case, I want to tease something else out here. David, going back into your analogy of starting people down a road where they will discover a viewpoint once they've implemented the first phase of a project or the first part of a project, or they've started to understand the proof of concept model that you've provided them with, and they start to say, well, I could do this, I could do that. How do you prevent scope creep? Thinking about your business model, you're a business person. You want to be able to run a project. You want to be able to deliver a project and say, that project is done. Now I want to move on.
We always lay out what we're going to do and what we're not going to do. And if we do something extra, it's at our discretion to maintain within our budgets. I absolutely got away from fixed fee. Invariably, once the company realizes what they have, their needs change. It is not practical for me to fix fee bid. So
it's back to that, you don't know what you don't know, isn't it?
Yeah, but I'll provide a range and say this is what is going to happen. And then we have to talk to them periodically about this is something that's significant and it's not something either you or I knew about when we came up with this deal. So how do you want to handle it?
Are we starting to identify something that is very significantly different between an accounting system implementation and a CRM implementation? Where an accounting system, you're essentially looking at a transactional based system where you are looking at the ins and outs of documents within the system, the invoices, the receipts, the orders that are placed within the system, and then that is simply documenting what is done, versus the how it is done within inside a CRM environment. Because you talked about process and talked about it being a communications system. So is that at the heart of it? The fact that you're teasing out, and essentially as people start to discover the way in which they do things, they're also learning about the way in which they can improve the way in which they do things.
Absolutely. These clients and their systems, they're always trying to evolve their business, and the system has to grow and bend with them. You know, I will say fundamentally it's a communication system. I'm big on using the word platform and system. This system can be completely, Jeff Richards-ified, Alpha Corp-ified, because people do. I mean, at least a lot of people appreciate that they do things a little bit differently, and the system is going to have to yield to their requirements as instead of the other way around. Yeah, flex, exactly.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. Jeff and I talk about this a lot, getting people on the journey, but also showing them the view on the way. And they're often quite conflicting emotions, I think, on a project. And hopefully your skills are good enough to give people both the big picture story, but also manage them along the journey. And to Jeff's point as well, we think, and we believe it, we might not be right, Jeff, but hey, accounting, in theory, you can box up reasonably safely in accounting delivery, because there is a certain fixed dimension about what you need, legislative requirements, and what the system can do. Whereas CRM, as you said, can be flexed. And I think managing that gap and managing both what's fixed and what's not fixed is an important evolution, right?
For me, it's the idea of process control is the thing that very often businesses are looking for when they're looking for a CRM system. And Dan, jump in and interrupt me on this. But if I think about the way in which you look at value chain analysis between when a customer is first approaching an organization to be able to get a product or a service delivered to them, what are the steps in that journey delivering value to the customer? So you want to be able to ensure that the process is as efficient as possible with the minimum number of steps between you want it, you got it. And that's something that, say, for example, shopping via a website really allows you to do, because it simplifies the process to click to order, to do all that. But that's not really an accounting system. That's looking where you're moved away from a transactional system into something that is to do with the thinking about the process by which people shop, and you've got all elements of psychology in there as well, and flipping into an environment which CRM would be used. We've got all those different workflows and monitoring points to take if we're sticking to the concept of taking an order through a website, through the opportunity generation and then the final purchase. How do we manage to make sure that you can deliver those types of systems within a understandable budget? What are the skills that you think you have to do that?
There's some laughter there, Jeff. Where is this going?
This is no laughter. This is probably the most deadly serious type of question for many of our partners. Like they're moving from if they're selling Sage CRM for the first time, they're moving from an environment in which they are used to Well, a company selling widgets is going to be very similar to a company selling flanges when it comes to the to the accounting system, perhaps, but they're going to be very, very different if they're moving into
service technicians or something.
The service technicians,
Yeah.
or the processes that surround that, even the support desk, the sales desk for that. How do you manage that?
I think because of my non-technical background, I have to approach these a different way. And because I didn't have that background, I got in the habit early on, and I had to, of documenting everything and showing a process. And that has carried forth. And when I'm meeting with a new company or any of our existing, I have to remind them of our process. I have to show them other systems. I have to show them our project workbooks and how it's a collaborative process, and that we're going to meet on Thursdays at 11 for the next 5 weeks. And in those 1-hour meetings together, we're going to hash this out and then start building it up in the background by showing them other examples and showing them the steps of how we get from here to there. It takes a lot of the maybe perceived risk out of them, and may add substance to what we're actually doing. That it is going to require a significant amount of their inputs, and I try to be as clear as possible about what we'll need them to do and the commitments that they're going to need in order for us to be successful. Many times I've said, don't start or don't do this now until you have the following couple things lined up.
I think that's a really interesting reflection of yours about you came to this being very structured and documenting heavy. And that is a great discipline, because you are right. People need to understand, people being customers need to understand that it requires an investment on their side. And you have to help them with that process, because it's not something they do every day. They don't buy CRM every week, whereas you live it every day. So it's helping them and guiding them and making them realize investment on their side is important. Next time, Dan picks up on Jeff's questions on CRM supporting value chain analysis, how CRM supports activities beyond the traditional accounting team, and what his company, My CRM Manager, brings to his customers through the value-adding partnerships he has with other people. You've been listening to Talking CRM with Jeff and David, getting the best for the whole organization from your integrated CRM and accounting systems.